Here's an episode of how to analyse poetry from the Learning Cauldron. Today, we'll be looking at Carol Ann Duffy's poem, Originally. Analysing poetry involves identifying and dissecting the literary techniques that the poet has used effectively to explore the theme or themes of a poem. In her poem, Originally, Carol Ann Duffy explores the themes of change, childhood and family, isolation, and identity. The title of the poem is Originally. We don't know initially what this is referring to, but it becomes clear by the end. The use of the first person plural we pronoun at the beginning is referring to Carol Ann Duffy's family, all of whom moved from Glasgow down to Staffordshire when she was only 6 years old. And it obviously has stuck in her memory. She recalls it very vividly. She describes how they moved in a red room which fell through the fields. And this is interesting. The red room is interpreted variously by critics. Some believe it to be a train carriage, others a car. You can make up your own mind on that. But whichever way she travelled, they were going quickly, which is the fell through the fields, with her mother singing their father's name to the turn of the wheels. But her brothers were not happy, just as she wasn't. They cried, and the bawling home, home gives a very clear impression of their discontent. They do not want to leave Scotland, and there's a nice enjambment here from home down to home to emphasise that, the repetition. And there's a lovely image here of the miles rushing back to the city. It's almost as if they're personified and they're going back, and it goes city, then a little bit more detailed, street, more detail again, house, and then right down to the specific vacant rooms that are left behind, and then there's the enjambment where we didn't live anymore. And we feel her pain at leaving this place. The word choice here of blind, when describing her toy that she's holding the paw of, shows her uncertainty. She doesn't know where she's going to, and this word choice is very evocative in conveying that. Moving on to the second stanza, it starts with probably the most important metaphor for you to remember from this poem. All childhood is an emigration. Now, when we think of emigration, we think of people leaving a country, and certainly that's what's happening here. But she's saying that childhood is an emigration. And what she means here is that it is almost, when you're growing up, as if you keep emigrating. You move from the familiarity of your mother's home, then to nursery, and then you get familiar with nursery, and you move to primary school, and then just as you get familiar with that, you move on again. And this is what she is explaining here, and it's beautifully put. All childhood is an emigration. And some of the changes, she says, are slow. The nice sibilance of some are slow, and it's a long sentence here emphasising that slowness. And then the use of a short sentence. Others are sudden, to emphasise that suddenness. And one of the ways that she noticed the change when she moved down to Staffordshire was that her accent was wrong. Now, the word choice of wrong here suggests that she almost felt guilty that she didn't fit in. Although she spoke the same language, her accent was enough to differentiate her from her classmates. And this lovely short sentence highlights her feeling of isolation. And then the feeling of aggression and being not comfortable in this new place is accentuated by the use of alliteration with big boys eating worms, which makes you think, oh, disgusting, and shouting words you don't understand. Again, she seems isolated in this new environment. And her parents are also feeling slightly anxious. We can tell that. She uses a nice simile here. My parents' anxiety stirred like a loose tooth. And as well as the fabulous imagery of a tooth that you can't ignore when it's wiggling in your mouth, there's also the sibilance of parents' anxiety stirred and loose, and also the two long ooh sounds there. So there's a lot going on in this quote, definitely one worth learning off by heart. And she mentioned at the beginning our own country, which is where they were leaving, Scotland, and in specifically Glasgow. And at the end of stanza 2, she's still yearning for her own country. She's not long moved from Glasgow. I want our own country, she says. And then moving on to the third and final stanza, this starts with the word but, which signals a slight change in direction. Previously, in the other two stanzas, she's been very sure about where she came from originally. Our own country, our own country. And then we learn that she forgets or doesn't recall or changes. And that polysyndetic list underlines her uncertainty. She's not so sure anymore. Her brother seems to have accepted the local ways. He swallows a slug, and the nice sibilance there suggests that it slips down a treat. He is beginning to get used to the ways of the Staffordshire young people. And when she sees him do this, she feels only a skelf of shame, which suggests that she doesn't feel as horrified as she did back here when she saw the big boys eating worms. But there is still that slight Scottishness, because the word choice of skelf is referring to maybe a small piece of wood that you get in your finger that you can't ignore, even though it's tiny. So a little bit of Scottishness is still in there. There's another fabulous image here. The imagery in this poem is great. We mentioned all childhood is an emigration, and now we have her tongue shedding its skin like a snake. There's a lovely sibilance there of shedding its skin and snake, which helps to create the sound of a snake, but also it's the idea that a snake's skin grows underneath before it sheds the skin on top. And it's the idea of the Staffordshire accent having formed underneath ready, and as the Scottish accent begins to disappear, the Staffordshire accent takes over. Fabulous image. And as a result, her voice now sounds in the classroom just like the rest, which suggests that she has become more Staffordshire. But she's not totally so, because she says, do I only think I lost a river, culture, speech, sense of her space and the right place? And that list is of the things that she feels she might have lost, but there might even be more than that. And she's just not sure. Is she Staffordshire or is she Scottish? So when people ask her, where do you come from? A perfectly natural question. And then they back that up with originally, meaning right at the beginning, she's no longer so sure. And that final sentence is short and sharp, and it really sums up her uncertainty. And I hesitate. And the word choice of hesitate means she cannot be sure anymore where she came from originally, which brings us right back to the title of the poem. So what's happened here is that Carol Ann Duffy takes us both on a literal journey, the one when she moves south, but also on a metaphorical journey and how she deals with change. I hope that's been helpful. See you next time.